In a small town called Jinyang County, workers recently unearthed an ancient Buddha head, said to be a relic from the Gaolai period, over 1,000 years old. For the town, this was something worth celebrating, but for the monks in the nearby temple, it was terrifying news. Because on the very same day the Buddha head was discovered, the statue of a bodhisattva on the temple wall began to weep blood. To the monks, this was a clear sign of doom. They immediately warned the townspeople. Under no circumstances should they dig up the Buddha head, or something terrible would happen. But the mayor didn't believe in such superstition. Hoping to use the Buddha head to boost tourism, he ordered it to be excavated that very night. When it was unearthed, its eyes were covered with a strip of cloth covered in strange symbols no one could read. The mayor had no idea what they meant. He only thought the cloth looked ugly. So, he told the workers to remove it. Little did he know, that single act would bring a catastrophe upon the entire town. Early the next morning, under the mayor's orders, a driver began cleaning the Buddha head. But the moment his eyes met its gaze, a sudden chill crept down his spine. When he looked up again, he saw a crow perched right on top of it, cawing nonstop. He casually shooed the bird away, then climbed into his truck to haul the Buddha head to the town's administrative hall. Normally, this man was a seasoned driver, calm and steady behind the wheel. But now, for some reason, he became uncharacteristically aggressive, nearly sideswiping a passing taxi. Just then, a gust of wind blew back the tarp covering the Buddha head. The taxi driver's eyes immediately went vacant, as if he'd fallen under some strange spell. And then, the weather turned. A moment ago, the town had been basking in bright sunlight. Now, thick black clouds swallowed the sky. Out in her vegetable patch, an old woman tending her crops felt a single drop of black rain hit the back of her hand. In her 80 years of life, she had never seen anything like it. But the black rain didn't stop. It grew heavier and heavier, and it kept falling all the way into the night. After delivering the Buddha head, the driver stopped by a small restaurant for a meal. But by the time he got there, the black rain had soaked him to the bone. He sat down, ordered a plate of pickles, and a bottle of sake. When suddenly, his eyes began to sting. He quickly made his way to the restroom to splash some water on his face, only to freeze in horror. Standing right there was his father, the same father who had died years ago. In life, the old man had been a hopeless gambler, and now, without a trace of warmth, he demanded money from his son. Panicked, the driver bolted out of the restroom. But in the blink of an eye, his father was already there, blocking his way. And yet, in the driver's eyes, the man's face began to twist and change, until it became the face of the restaurant owner. It was all just an illusion. Now, with both eyes clouded white, the driver's gaze locked on this father, watching that horrifying face slowly advance toward him. Terrified, he grabbed the sake bottle and smashed it down with all his strength. It was clear, this man harbored deep hatred toward his father. But he had no idea, the one he was beating nearly to death was actually the restaurant owner. Fortunately, 2 customers rushed in and managed to pull him away, saving the owner from what could have been a fatal beating. Soon, the police received a call. The sheriff, who had just gotten home from work, was summoned back by a colleague. Outside, the sky was still pouring black rain mixed with hail the size of eggs, one of which smashed right through her front windshield. She cursed the crazy weather when a taxi came swerving toward her. Behind the wheel was the same driver who had been staring at the Buddha statue earlier that day. Now, he was mumbling to himself, his eyes looking like 2 pale, swollen lychees. He slammed the gas, as if trapped in some hallucination, seeing memories he never wanted to relive. The sheriff swerved hard, barely avoiding a collision. When she finally pulled up to the station, she noticed something strange. Embedded in the chunk of hail that had broken her windshield was a human face. Without stopping to think about it, she headed inside, where officers were talking about a truck driver who had just beaten up a restaurant owner. The sheriff was stunned. This guy was known as one of the most honest men in town, someone who'd never raise a hand to anyone. But right now, he was anything but normal. He was acting bizarre, calling everyone dad, his body convulsing, foam spilling from his mouth, and those pale, lifeless eyes sent a chill straight down her spine. Just as the sheriff was about to take a closer look, the driver suddenly went berserk and lunged forward like a madman. Even though he was cuffed to the chair, he almost tore his own arm right off, bone and all, trying to break free. The sheriff immediately tackled him, while the other officers rushed in to help. They quickly called an ambulance, planning to get him to the hospital as fast as possible. The driver eventually passed out and finally went quiet, but after an initial check, the doctor still couldn't figure out what kind of illness he had. Maybe, once he reached the hospital, they'd finally get an answer. The next day, 2 monks heard that the mayor had dug up the Buddha head, and strange, unexplainable things had started happening in town. Alarmed, they rushed to a university in the city to find Ki-hoon, an archaeologist, hoping he could help translate the symbols written on the piece of cloth. They believed this statue might actually be the legendary Ghost Buddha, a cursed idol possessed by an evil spirit, said to bring disaster whenever it reappears. The cloth, they suspected, was actually a seal meant to keep it contained. If they could figure out what the symbols meant, they might have a chance to stop the coming disaster. Ki-hoon immediately recognized the writing as Tibetan script, but the exact meaning would take more time to uncover. Back home, he buried himself in books and old records, but no matter how much he read, he still couldn't fully understand it. In the end, he had no choice but to send everything he had gathered to his wife, Soo-jin, who was also an archaeologist, hoping she could help him crack the mystery. Turns out, the couple had been living apart for a while, one in the city, the other in the countryside. The reason? A tragic accident just a few months back. A runaway truck had slammed into their daughter, killing her instantly. From that moment on, their lives fell apart, especially Soo-jin, who had witnessed her daughter's horrific death with her own eyes. Unable to bear the pain, she left her husband and moved to the countryside. And that countryside, it just happened to be Jinyang County, the same place where the cursed Buddha head had been unearthed. Unlike her husband, Soo-jin was more drawn to the study of ancient texts. She threw herself into deciphering the strange runes wrapped around the Buddha's eyes. Before long, she cracked their meaning. If you do not look into the heart, it does not exist. In plain terms, as long as you never meet the ghost Buddha's gaze, the inner demon won't consume you. The reason the world had turned into the hell it was now was because people locked eyes with the ghost Buddha. The curse made them see their own inner demons, drove them insane, and pushed them to commit unspeakable acts. Soo-jin wasted no time. She sent the translation straight to Ki-hoon. Back at the temple, the monks wasted no time after receiving the news. They were ready to head straight to Jinyang County to check on the cursed Buddha's condition. But to their surprise, the abbot blocked their way. It turned out the mayor had already called him earlier, saying the Buddha's public exhibition was about to begin, and warning the monks not to cause any trouble that might ruin the event. The abbot even urged them to stop their investigation altogether. It was obvious to anyone with eyes. He'd taken a payoff from the mayor. With no way to leave the mountain, the monks had no choice but to prepare for the worst. Their only option now was to dig into the cursed Buddha's origins, hoping to find some way to counter whatever was coming. Meanwhile, down in the village, last night's black rain had destroyed the crops. Furious, the villagers decided to march into town and demand an explanation. Among them was Soo-jin, one of the few highly educated people in the area. The neighbors insisted she come along. Maybe she could speak up and help their case. On the way to the government hall, the radio crackled with a news report. There had been a traffic accident. A taxi driver had died on the spot. It didn't take long for Soo-jin to realize. It was the same driver who'd been stopped by the cursed Buddha. Moments later, the group finally arrived at their destination. As soon as Soo-jin stepped out of the car, her eyes landed on a giant tour bus parked nearby. Plastered across its side was a bold slogan, proudly advertising the town's so-called treasure, the ancient Buddha head. They had turned it into some kind of mascot, a gimmick to lure in tourists. What she didn't realize, though, was that this mascot was actually the cursed Buddha her husband had sent her to investigate. It wasn't until she walked into the exhibition hall and saw the real thing sitting on display, along with the strip of cloth covered in Tibetan script, now removed and locked inside a glass case, that the truth finally hit her. But by then, it was already too late. She had already locked eyes with the cursed Buddha, and judging by the crowd around her, plenty of others had too. Thinking fast, she switched off the spotlight inside the display case. But almost immediately, strange visions began creeping in. In the crowd, she spotted the truck driver who had killed her daughter. The loss of her child, her deepest wound, had just been ripped open again. Realizing how dangerous this had become, Soo-jin rushed to the restroom, pulled out her phone, and called her husband. She told him everything, her voice shaking. On the other end, Ki-hoon wasted no time. He jumped into his car and sped toward the town. Inside the hall, the villagers were crowding around the mayor, demanding answers. Their crops had all been ruined by the black rain. This year's harvest was doomed, and they had no idea how they'd survive. But the mayor told them not to worry, insisting the black rain wouldn't harm the crops. Plus, now that they had this giant Buddha head, they could turn the place into a tourist hotspot and never have to worry about money again. But before he could finish, a villager burst into the hall, clutching a sickle. His eyes were twisted and strange, clearly cursed by the ghost Buddha. A man in a hat, not realizing the danger, stepped forward to calm him down. only to have his throat slit in an instant. The sudden violence sent the room into chaos. People screamed, chairs toppled, and everyone rushed for the exits. In the middle of the panic, Sujin saw another vision of the driver. Without hesitation, she grabbed her neighbor and bolted out of the hall. But once outside, they froze in horror. The entire town had descended into madness. Anyone who had locked eyes with the ghost Buddha had transformed, attacking people like rabid zombies. Some even hurled themselves from rooftops, as if their minds had completely shattered. Sujin froze in shock as she saw a speeding truck plow straight into her neighbor, killing them instantly. But the bloodshed didn't stop there. Screams filled the air, and the man with the scythe had gone completely berserk. He targeted any government workers whose skin was still intact, and even hiding in a car wasn't safe. He smashed through the window with his scythe, and while his victim tried desperately to fight back, the driver beside him suddenly transformed as well. With monsters closing in from both sides, the man stood no chance. Seeing the situation spiral out of control, the mayor's group tried to flee in their car. But then the female secretary suddenly mutated, grabbed a pin from the ground, and stabbed the co-worker in front of her. Just as the mayor was about to be killed, a man stepped in at the last second and saved him. The mayor wasted no time. He bolted from the scene in a panic. But up on the rooftop, a group of street punks weren't terrified at all. In fact, they were thrilled. To them, the end of the world was the best thing that could have happened. Their leader, Yongju, was no stranger to brawls, and this chaos felt like it was made for him. He jumped down to join the fight, smashing a mutant's head in with a hammer. Fighting without worrying about jail? To him, it was perfect. As more and more people mutated, the survivors had no choice but to retreat back into the town hall. Just as they were about to shut the doors, a mutant slipped in and grabbed the unlucky mayor by the leg. No one there had any fighting skills. They couldn't even handle one infected. Luckily, Yongju showed up just in time. With quick moves, he dragged the mutant away and took care of it in no time. But the mayor was ungrateful. The moment Yongju was done, he slammed the glass door shut and locked it. Thankfully, one of his henchmen had already snuck inside and quickly unlocked the door, letting Yongju back in. In the past, the mayor might have been the boss around here. But now, the power belonged to Yongju, the toughest guy in the room. The mayor dared not say a word and just told everyone to follow orders. Yongju, on the other hand, was loving every second of being in control. After they barricaded the doors, their phones suddenly buzzed with an emergency alert from the government. The message made it clear the authorities knew what was happening in Jinyan County. Trying to calm everyone down, the mayor assured them help was on the way. Now all they had to do was wait. The group started debating what was going on, why perfectly normal people suddenly lost their minds. Yongju stepped up and laid it out. The black rain from yesterday was definitely to blame. The rain had to be carrying some kind of virus, infecting everyone and causing this madness. Then Yongju asked who had actually been caught in the rain. A few honest folks sheepishly raised their hands, including the mayor's assistant standing right beside him. The assistant was smirking, acting proud like it was some badge of honor. Without hesitation, Yongju charged forward and gave him a hard kick. Since all of those people had been drenched in the black rain, nobody knew when they might mutate next. For safety's sake, Yongju threatened the mayor, tie them all up, now. The mayor, scared himself and no longer in control, had no choice but to agree. Sujin hadn't raised her hand, but she looked off, clearly not right. So they locked her up with the others too. Outside, the situation was still a complete nightmare, truly a living hell. The news had picked up the story about Jinyan County and was reporting heavily on it. Just like Yongju suspected, the government also believed the black rain was to blame, but they were waiting on lab results to know exactly what was causing it. To stop the disaster from spreading, the military had put Jinyan County under a full lockdown. Some people started worrying if any help would ever come. When asked, the mayor stayed silent, clearly unsure himself. The bus driver refused to just sit and wait to die. He suggested they all escape together, driving his bus out of town. But the thought of those bloodthirsty mutants lurking outside quickly made everyone drop the idea. Meanwhile, all roads leading into the town were completely sealed off by the military. No one was allowed in or out. Rescue teams weren't even being sent in. Ki-hoon, who had just arrived, was stopped at the checkpoint. Even the police chief, returning from the hospital, was denied entry. The chief was desperate. Her son was volunteering at the town hall today, and she had to find a way to save him. With no other options, the police chief met Ki-hoon and learned he was also heading to the town hall to rescue his wife, and he had driven there himself. So, the chief decided to take a back road with him into the town. Since the highway had opened, Hardly anyone used this route anymore. Only locals knew about it, and the military hadn't sealed it off yet. After passing through a tunnel, they smoothly entered the town. But danger wasn't far behind. Suddenly, a swarm of crows appeared and launched a furious attack on them. In the chaos, they dove into a nearby house for safety, but the crows started banging on the windows, clearly not ready to let them go. With the windows about to break, Ki-hoon grabbed a bag of sugar from the kitchen and poured it onto the table, making some strange gestures over it. Then, something incredible happened. They seemed to vanish, as the crows flew right past them without noticing. It turned out Ki-hoon wasn't just an archaeologist. He had some knowledge of the supernatural. The pattern on the table was a protective charm he had drawn. Still, even he wasn't sure why the crows were out of control or if it was connected to that cursed Buddha statue. From Sujin, Ki-hoon learned that since yesterday, the town had been experiencing strange weather, black rain and hailstones with human faces. Hearing this, Ki-hoon immediately called the monk to ask what was really going on. The monk explained that these were supernatural phenomena caused by the appearance of the cursed Buddha statue, a warning from the heavens to the people. In other words, the black rain itself wasn't directly harmful. Learning that Ki-hoon had just entered Jinyang County, the monk planned to secretly leave the mountain behind the abbot's back. But then he was told the town was completely sealed off. Realizing this, the monk knew things had gotten serious. Jinyang County must be in chaos by now. However, they had uncovered the origin of the cursed Buddha and found a way to deal with it. It turned out the spirit inhabiting the statue wasn't just an ordinary evil ghost, but the vengeful soul of a brutal murderer from 1,000 years ago. To avoid capture, he disguised himself as a monk and hid in the temple until he was found and executed. After beheading, his restless spirit transformed into a vengeful demon and possessed the statue. This cursed Buddha could manipulate people's minds, sow discord, and turn them against each other. The high monks managed to seal him away long ago, but after 1,000 years, the statue was unearthed again, and over time, the curse only grew stronger and more dangerous. The only way to stop this now was to reseal the curse, cover the cursed Buddha's eyes again, and rewrite those protective runes. This wasn't a task just anyone could do, and since the monks couldn't enter Jinyang County, it was up to Ki-hoon to carry it out. To help him succeed, the monks planned to chant prayers over the phone, weakening the demon's power as Ki-hoon performed the ritual. After hanging up, the two realized they couldn't just sit around waiting anymore. They burst out of the room, and the crow swarm started stirring again. The police chief quickly dove into the car, while Ki-hoon braved the crow attacks, scooping up some black mud from a puddle and spreading it across the hood, drawing the exact same protective symbol once again. Thanks to the charm, the crows finally stopped their assault. Without wasting a moment, the two sped off toward the government hall. Along the way, Ki-hoon stopped the car and dumped a box of magazines into water, preparing to use them to cover the cursed Buddha's eyes. But by now, Sujin was starting to change. Visions of her daughter's fatal accident flooded her mind. The young guard watching them froze in terror when he saw her mutated eyes. Before he could react, Sujin shoved him down and jabbed a wooden stick hard into his thigh. Sujin stormed into the hall and started attacking everyone around her. Just as the mayor was about to meet a grim fate, Yongju kicked her away. But when Yongju grabbed a chair, ready to strike again, a young, handsome guy stepped in. It was Du Kyung, the police chief's son. Kind-hearted Du Kyung tried to stop Yongju from killing, but instead, he got beaten badly. At that moment, the others who had been tied up came out, begging everyone to spare them. Someone spoke up in their defense, and even the mayor thought killing them outright was too cruel. However, he came up with a harsh plan. He wanted to kick them all out, leaving only those who hadn't been soaked by the black rain. Essentially, he was sentencing them to die on their own. Surprisingly, everyone except Du Kyung agreed with the mayor's plan. Just as they were about to act, Du Kyung stood up again to stop them. Yongju quickly grabbed him to pull him away. In their struggle, they accidentally shattered the glass protecting the cursed Buddha statue, suddenly exposing it for everyone to see. This was it. Everyone now saw the Buddha statue's eyes. Worse yet, a mutated young woman dragged in a bucket of gasoline and set fire to the building's air conditioner outside. Moments later, a loud explosion shook the hall, and flames erupted outside, making it clear that staying here was no longer an option. Youngju decided to leave immediately, planning to drive the bus and escape the town. The others, unwilling to wait for death, quickly cleared the obstacles blocking the door. Except for the few tied-up people in Dukyung, who chose to stay, everyone else lined up and slowly made their way to the bus. But a thick fog outside made visibility almost zero. They couldn't see a thing, only feeling their way forward. And it wasn't long before the mutants noticed them. After knocking down 2 unlucky victims in a row, the others finally spotted the bus. One of the mutants tried to grab the driver, but luckily, Youngju yanked the mutant away and started pounding on him. Thanks to Youngju's cover, everyone managed to get on the bus safely. Just as they were about to drive off, a guy who had fallen behind caught up, but before he could get on, a mutant suddenly appeared and grabbed him. Without hesitation, Youngju kicked both the guy and the mutant away. Seeing this, the driver quickly shut the doors and sped off. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, except Youngju, who noticed something was wrong with the driver. As he moved to check, the driver suddenly mutated, wildly swerving the bus out of control. At that moment, Ki-hoon and the police chief appeared right in front of him, about to collide head-on. Just in time, Youngju yanked the steering wheel hard to avoid the crash. But the mutated driver's strength was too much, and he slammed the wheel again, causing the bus to flip over. Seeing this, the police chief tried to get out and help, but Ki-hoon stopped her, insisting the top priority was sealing the cursed Buddha statue. Meanwhile, everyone on the bus, including Youngju and the mayor, had mutated and started turning on each other. The scene was horrifying. In the end, only the strongest fighter, Youngju, emerged, but he was severely injured and slipped into unconsciousness. Elsewhere, the monks began chanting prayers over the phone. With everything set, Ki-hoon drove the car straight into the hall, crashing into the Buddha statue. He shut his eyes tight, warning the police chief not to look at the statue. But as she entered, the chief caught a glimpse of her son, and worried about him, she turned to check, only to see the statue. There was no time to hesitate. She rushed to find her son, who had also mutated and immediately attacked her. Fortunately, being a skilled officer, she managed to overpower him and subdue him. But then, in the next moment, she also suddenly transformed, pulling out a gun and aiming it at her son's head. Still, her reason held strong, and she fought back the urge to pull the trigger. Right then, Ki-hoon finally covered the Buddha's eyes and inscribed the protective symbols, completing the seal. Instantly, the mother and son snapped back to their senses. Ki-hoon then spotted his wife Soo-jin on the ground nearby. Calling out to her, she slowly regained consciousness. But the burning flames triggered the fire sprinklers, which started pouring water all over the hall. The magazine covering the Buddha's eyes began to slip, and just as Ki-hoon reached out to fix it, the paper fell off. He accidentally met the Buddha's gaze, and everything went wrong again. The mother and son both mutated once more, struggling violently until they crashed against a wall, passing out. Meanwhile, Ki-hoon spun around to see his wife had transformed into a spider-like creature. Yet, from Soo-jin's point of view, it was her husband who was lying unconscious on the ground. At that moment, the monks' voices came through the phone. From Soo-jin's words, they learned that Ki-hoon's sealing attempt had failed, and now she was the only one still holding onto her sanity. The monks entrusted her with the heavy responsibility of resealing the cursed Buddha, instructing her to chant prayers to suppress the evil spirit while guiding her through the sealing process. Soo-jin first covered her own eyes with a cloth, then carefully reached out to cover the Buddha's eyes again, this time using a magazine. Just as she was about to write the protective symbols, Ki-hoon suddenly snapped awake and lunged at her, pinning her down. As they struggled, one of the steel cables holding the Buddha snapped, and the whole vehicle started shaking violently. Seeing the danger, Soo-jin didn't hesitate. She pushed her husband off the car. The moment she jumped off, the last cable gave way, and the Buddha, along with the vehicle, plummeted down. A massive explosion completely destroyed the cursed Buddha. In the next instant, everyone's minds cleared, the dark clouds in the sky parted, and the town returned to its peaceful state. It seemed that with the destruction of the statue, the evil spirit possessing it had finally vanished. After everything they'd been through, the couple finally let go of their pain and began a new chapter in their lives. They started traveling the world, searching for other supernatural events like this one. And in the story's final moments, they discovered a strange corpse, hinting that their journey was far from over.